there might be something that's bothering you, which is the reason why there is still a seeker. Because there's a problem. From that problem, there's a separation that looks at that problem. So that's you, the separate self, that is fighting against that problem. Then that separate self is looking at that video, and you hope, as that separate self, that this video will say something to you that will give you the secret key to get rid of that problem. But I'm gonna ask you to accept that problem as part of what is. Don't have to do anything about it. You shouldn't look for a solution right now. Just for a few minutes at least. Accept it as part of what is. You don't need a solution right now. There's just this moment. You don't need to know anything right now. You don't need an answer. You don't even need questions. You don't need the secret key. You don't need enlightenment. You don't need non-duality. You don't need duality. So when this problem is finally accepted as part of what simply is, then this separate self has no reason to exist. And when this separate self has no reason to exist, then you'll recognize the nature of that problem. Because as soon as that separate self will melt into nothingness, then this problem will also vanish, because they are one. Then there is no desire to seek anymore. And when there's no mind that wants to seek, then there's just this being, like it's the whole moment is just what it is. There's no one involved in that moment, no separate being involved in that moment that wants to change it. Nobody is demanding pleasure, perfection. Nobody wants to avoid suffering. It's just the recognition that if there is someone that's trying to avoid suffering, and that's creating suffering, so I'm no longer trying to avoid suffering because I want to have peace. So I'm no longer, I decide to no longer shout for silence, no longer fighting for peace, simply surrender. And all of a sudden it's clear that there is no path to enlightenment somewhere in the future. It's just this. When you're sitting down, practicing Zazen, it's all about finding out that there's nothing for you in it. You won't get an advantage for doing Zazen. It's just killing you, the one that wants to have an advantage. The one that wants to do Zazen to solve a problem. That one disappears. When that one disappears, then there's no problem anymore. There's just flow state. We can call that flow state. some non-dual speakers say that nobody's here. There's no one here. Of course that's true. Because when I'm doing something, for example, I'm hungry. This body's hungry, so it wants to eat something. And naturally, it's just walking to the kitchen, eating something, but then the thought says, it was my choice. That's what's creating me in my life, which is seemingly separating this organism from the rest of what I am. This is why there is no one here. No one, because one implies other, me and you and them, but there's just the whole isness. No one's separate in it. But when they say that no one's here and you're listening to those words with your mind, what can happen is that you feel guilty for feeling as if you are a separate person. They tell you that no one's here. You want to have what they have, right? So you trust them in a way that there's no one here, but I feel like I'm here. So I'm feeling guilty for feeling that I'm here. So you're splitting yourself off from this body and you're denying life and disassociating yourself from what is, because you don't want to be in that body. You shouldn't do that. If it happens, it happens, but that's not what it's about. It's not about disassociating with life. It's becoming one with it. No longer separating yourself from what is happening right now. It's all about, recognizing that you are the whole moment. You're not a separate self looking at the moment, looking at the environment. Because self can only be a self if there is a world. And the recognition of a world can only be if there is a self. So self and world cannot be really separated. So there's no separation between me and the world. There's just experience. That's one thing. But oneness wouldn't be accurate also, because one implies other. But it's about non-duality. So it says not to. There are not two. Now what does that mean? It is a great choice to use the term not to or non-duality, because it confuses the mind, because it cannot really understand what do you mean not to. So when there's confusion and there's no understanding, it gives you a glimpse into the nature of the mind. The fact that there are things that the mind cannot understand. So there is more. The mind cannot grasp everything. So your nature is beyond what your mind can understand. The mind knows only effort. But effortless being is beyond the mind. The mind is like, what do you mean effortless? Nah. I have to wake up and then I have to do my work and then I have to do this and that. And that's okay. Let the mind do that. But there's another dimension that is happening simultaneously. Behind that, I'm using those words. They're not really accurate, but you get the energy. So behind that, there's like a dimension. there's just effortless being. Because the body's doing what it's supposed to do. It was always doing the things by itself. And you were never the thought that says, I'm doing it, or it requires so much effort. You were never that. So let the body do what it's doing. You're one with the moment. There's no separation, no one that says, I feel the effort. It's just that, being one with what is. I was outside with a friend and we were talking and walking for hours and didn't feel like I was walking and talking. It was just spontaneous happening. The most natural thing there is. You know, I always say enlightenment is such a noble word. An exotic word for simple being. Just this moment. Separation begins when you think that there is something wrong with this moment, and then from that problem there's a separate being that looks at the problem, but this is the problem itself. It's like the problem is here, it splits off, there's a separate self, and that separate self wants to find a solution. Just look at the problem. Is it really a problem, or can I just accept that problem? Is there even someone that has the ability to not accept it, or to accept it? Or is it simply a part of what is? And there's no one that could do something about it. There's no subject that can do something about the objective world. So when this is recognized, then there's just this, there's just what is. Now, of course, when non-dual speakers say there's no one, and you're accepting what is, and it feels like in the body, it feels like there's shame because I'm allowing, or the body mind mechanism allows itself to be in a state of vulnerability. There's like this shame, and there's a thought that says, oh, but the non-dual speaker said that no one's here, but yet here I am and I feel ashamed. Now that doesn't make sense. Now this thought and this feeling is also just what's happening, and because there's not two, that's allowed. So there's no problem. There's no problem with having a problem, like feeling bad. Who's feeling bad? Let the body feel bad, but find out if it's you that's feeling bad or if it's just feeling bad. It's not about solving a problem. The ego won't have an advantage after awakening. After awakening, it's just clear that nobody's here that's having an advantage. But yet normal life situations continue to happen. So I don't have an advantage. It's just there are more moments of complete surrender, which seems to lead this body-mind mechanism into a state of, just love. Yes, love. It's a feeling of love. But it's not love for me. There was like a phrase or a quote, but I don't know where I've seen that. It's like when the difference between ego and no self is the ego says, I love the fish, therefore I eat the fish. And no self says, I love the fish, therefore I let it swim. So if there is no self and you feel this feeling of love, then all of a sudden it goes away. And you feel a negative emotion. There's like a negative emotion. But there, you know that you cannot do anything about it because it is what it is. So there's just a letting go. It's just surrender, okay? There's just this immediate acceptance of what is. So there's this negative emotion. It's allowed to be. It is what it is. This is it, including the problem, including the feeling of I'm a separate self. But then there's this immediate surrender. And that's the only way that the love is allowed to come back, because it can only come when there's this surrender. If you try to get it, there's no chance that you will feel the peace and unity and love of simple being. We were trained to always attain things. Which is causing trauma, PTSD. We don't know how to simply enjoy life, you know. We want to turn every simple thing into a science, but it's all about simple being. And I think that's it. So, if you want to, you can like this video, leave a comment, subscribe, and have a great day.